Welcome to Just Wanna Quilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School, where we explore all kinds of things, stories about quilting, tools, field trips, maybe some famous quilters stop by, and, of course, a little bit of copyright thrown in just for fun. I'm Elizabeth Townsend Guard. I'm a law professor at Tulane University Law School, and I just want to quilt. All right, so we had a famous quilter stop by this week. Jacquie Gering is joining us tonight. She is so amazing and cool and interesting, and she's a modern quilter, and she's a teacher, and she writes books, and she is spectacular. I hope you enjoy the interview. Oh, this is so exciting. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I am thrilled and a little bit shy. I don't get shy very often, but I'm really excited and very, very excited that you're here. Beyond excited, like amazing. So thank you so much for your time tonight. It means a lot, and I know you're super, super busy.
You're really very welcome. I'm happy to do it. I'm glad we could actually find a time.
Definitely. Okay, so I don't know if you know, I'll tell you really quickly about the project just in case you don't know. I'm a law professor that likes to, I'm a law professor who's now a full professor, so I'm doing a ridiculous project on quilting and copyright, but it turned into just really understanding the quilting industry, which turned into a podcast, which turned into taking my entire life over in the most ridiculous way. So, we've been, the podcast has been up and running for about 8 weeks, and we've done, I think we've aired about 70. We do 5 shows a week, and we have more to come. And wow. I'm trying to understand everything about it, from fancy quilters like you, famous quilters, to regular quilters, to the industry, to people who make thread, to everything. So to better understand the role of intellectual property in the system. That's kind of what intellectual IP professors do.
Exciting.
I have, my list is ridiculous. So I have a list that goes on and on and on. We won't get to everything. We might just like the first question. Now, one of the things, there's a lot out there on you, and I've watched your, video there's a video on Craftsy from the QuiltCon 2013 about, right? That you did. Yes. So I really want to talk about lots of things, but I'm totally afraid that I want to make sure that we cover areas that we haven't, that people may not. I want to make sure we get to interesting stuff that try not to be super repetitive, but it's hard because people may or may not know you, but they probably all do know you. So,
you'd be surprised. The quilting community is pretty big, and you'd be surprised who doesn't know me.
That's amazing. Well, I know you because I'm just beyond. I don't get like very fangirly, but tonight I am. So, okay, so we start with so because we're doing this as a preservation recording, because we're donating everything to Quilt Alliance, or the video. I'm a trained oral historian and a law professor, so that's important to me too. So the first question I'm going to ask you is something I already know, which is, can you tell me your name and where you're calling from tonight?
My name is Jacquie Gering, and I'm calling from Kansas City, Missouri.
Awesome. And we always start with the same question. What's your first memory of someone sewing or quilting in your life?
Oh, gosh. So probably my great-grandma. I remember her, well, she did everything. Tatting, crochet, knitting, sewing. She almost always had a needle in her hand, I think.
I love that. And then when did you start sewing or quilting?
Well, so I started sewing as a kid because I was taught to sew by my great-grandma and my mom, primarily garment sewing, but I hated it. And as soon as I got my first job, I stopped sewing. That's great. And I wasn't very good at it either. And, I made stuff that looked homemade, and I didn't enjoy it. I didn't like it, and I wasn't very good at it. And so I didn't start quilting until 2009, I think, 2009.
Amazing. So, and how quickly did you know that was what you really wanted to be doing? And so one of the things I've been quilting like forever, and my quilting is okay. I'm an okay quilter. And I wonder, like, we have some people here that are like you, not like you superstar, but like they're just like, you look at their stuff and you're like, that is amazing. Do you think it's something that like you learn? Do you think it's something that's just because of like something inside of you? Like, is it nature nurture? Like, what makes somebody like a standout quilter? Do you have a sense of what that is?
So I think it's a couple of things. Number one, I work my butt off.
Yeah.
And so the more you quilt, the better you are at it. And I also think it's part of my personality. I think if you would ask my family and friends, they would tell you that if I find something that I love or am interested in, I take a deep dive. I go all the way. So that's part of my personality.
Yeah.
But I think if you only make a quilt every 2 years, it's hard to get really good at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's both parts of that, I think.
Yeah. That's interesting. And your style is just, I love it. So obviously you're known for your modern style. How did you find the Modern Quilt? Tell us a little bit about the role of the Modern Quilt Guild in your life and QuiltCon, and how that's impacted sort of who you are.
So I found the modern community kind of by accident, by Googling. And I started connecting with people through blogs and through Flickr and online. And it was like I had found my tribe, While I love all quilts, finding people who made kind of in the style that I love was eye-opening. And that was before the start of the Modern Quilt Guild. And as the LA Guild started, and I know Elisa pretty well, and I remember the email I sent her complaining to her, why do you get this? And because I was jealous. And she emailed back and said, so, idiot, start your own. And so I did. And, having that connection with people who are interested in the same thing that you're interested in, is really important, So, and in Kansas City, we say to each other in our guild, Quilt Guild changed my life.
Yeah.
It truly did, because before I didn't even have a friend that owned a sewing machine.
That's really interesting.
And now, I have this community that I'm part of, and that's pretty supportive and really motivating.
What do you think the role of the guilds are? I feel that way about this project, I have to say, because all these people have joined. I have this crazy quilting army of people that are like mostly women, but men and women who are willing to do ridiculous things with me. And it really already within the last 9 months is just like my whole life is different. I have friends in a different way, and it's kind of the quilting community is so remarkable and joyful and giving and kind. I mean, there's bad parts too. Don't get me wrong, but it's just kind of an amazing experience. So you found that in the Quilt Guild. What role do guilds play in the quilting industry, do you think?
Well, I think we perpetuate each other. I think is a good way to say it. For me personally, I think of the word guild, and I think of it in that old-fashioned term where mentors, brought up the young people and taught them the skills that they had, and you become an apprentice and an expert. And so guilds for me are all about learning.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, it's about community and finding people who inspire you, who teach you, who motivate you, my 2 studio mates right now, I have a studio where the 3 of us are together outside of the house, and I found them both through Guild.
That's really cool. All right, so you're I would say, maybe you probably would agree with this. The most famous quote you did is "Bang Your Debt." Bang Your Debt. Would you agree with that? Would you think that that's like the piece that people, or is there other pieces you think? That's an incredible piece.
I think that piece, and then probably my Building Bridges quilt as well.
That's great too. Yeah. It's
So
really cool.
I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me about, for those that don't know, it's on your website. You can go to the gallery. If people are listening, you can go and see a lot of, but it's the very first piece that you see. And I know the story about it because I've heard you talk about it, but tell me about this piece so that people know, and then we'll talk more about other things, if you're cool.
So I moved from Kansas City to Chicago with my husband, and it was a big move. Chicago is a very different place to live, and I'd never lived in a big city like that. My husband was working for the Chicago Public Schools, quite an experience for him. It was a lot of things that came together, and for my husband, I watched him just work his butt off for those 500,000 kids. And he was being affected physically. And I finally asked him, I said, you got to talk to me, and the hours he was keeping. And one of the things he told me was about the overnight violence report that he got the very first thing when he went to work every morning. And it was a list of kids that went to school in the city of Chicago who got hurt, stabbed, shot, killed that day. And, the sense of urgency that put in my husband, and I'm an educator as well. And, I just, and then I started watching the news, and, most of those kids don't even make the news.
Yeah.
And I've always been, so I was an elementary school principal, and I did conflict resolution at my school. And I've always been passionate about anti-violence. And, that move to Chicago changed the way I work as a quilter. And I was also inspired by Sean Kimber, who
I interviewed her this morning. That's so amazing.
I just discovered Sean, and I admired her so much, and how she put what she believed and felt in her work.
Yeah.
And I just kind of said to myself, if she can do it, I can do it too.
Yeah.
And that's where that came from. And it literally, that move, that quilt, changed the way I work as a quilter.
That's really interesting. And in what way did it change the way you work?
So I always kind of, what I made comes from my experience, my life, my friends, my family. Quilts are stories to me. But I didn't realize that I could really have a voice through a piece, and it allowed me to express, and not just through bang, but through a lot of my work.
Yeah.
And I actually made bridges after the move to Chicago too, and that was a stepping stone towards bang. Because bridges is that kind of a quilt as well. And so it was just a really kind of powerful turn for me as a quilter.
It's really interesting, and it is. Your work and her work is really inspiring to think about how to use quilts to express your story in whatever way you want to express it. So they're both really powerful. It's been a really amazing day. Okay, so we're going to shift a little bit. I'm curious about, how I know you is from Craftsy.com. Your class is on there, and your lecture on there. And I'm curious what you think about Craftsy.com and what role that plays in this ecosystem of quilting.
Oh, that's really interesting. So Craftsy has changed a lot over, I think it was 5 years ago that I filmed my first class with them. They were this little startup kind of, in fact, my first class almost didn't get filmed because they weren't sure that anything modern would sell. It's been a real kind of journey with them. And I really love being able to connect through teaching with people who can't find me in person.
Yeah.
So that's the power of Craftsy for me, is that I can get that information out to somebody in rural Montana who may not even have a local quilt shop that they can take classes at, or
Right.
finding it in a mentor